All right, picture this. It's 1929, and a German theologian named Gustav Adolf Deismann is conducting this really systematic, meticulous survey of old documents. He's deep in the dusty, incredibly quiet archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, surrounded by literally centuries of history. He just happens to stumble upon something that has been sitting there completely unexamined for roughly 400 years. What he found was a map, drawn on a fragment of gazelle skin measuring about 90 by 65 centimeters. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're opening up the archive on one of the most baffling, hotly debated documents in human history, the Piri Reis map. So, anchor yourself right there in that year of discovery, 1929. When this piece of gazelle skin was finally pulled out of the dark, experts quickly identified it. It was originally drawn by Ahmet Muhuddin Piri, who is much better known to history as Piri Reis. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that he wasn't some mystic, and he definitely wasn't just an amateur making wild guesses at the edges of the world. He was a highly reputed Ottoman admiral and a remarkably brilliant professional cartographer. He compiled the single most accurate picture of the world he possibly could, using the best sources available to him. But the date written on this map in his very own hand, the Islamic month of Muharram and the year 919 Hijri, well, that's exactly where our anomaly begins. You see, that date corresponds to the year 1513. The surviving fragment of this map depicts the Atlantic Ocean, the western coasts of Europe and Africa, and the eastern coasts of the Americas. But along the very bottom edge is this substantial, highly detailed landmass. It depicts a southern coastline a staggering 307 years before the continent of Antarctica was officially sighted by documented European explorers in 1820. Now, you might be wondering, what's so special about this southern coastline? Well, it isn't just some smooth, theoretical line drawn in to make the map look nice and balanced. It's incredibly detailed. It features specific bays, river mouths, and peninsulas in a region of the globe where absolutely no European explorer had sailed yet. It heavily suggests a real, physically observed coastline rather than just an artistic placeholder. So the massive question we have to ask is, how exactly do you draw a map of a place 3 centuries before anyone actually discovers it?
Section 1, the cartographer and his sources.
To really understand this map, we first have to understand the man who drew it. Piri Reis's career spanned the absolute most active period of Ottoman naval expansion. He authored the Book of Navigation, which is this massive, incredibly detailed volume containing sailing directions and charts for the Mediterranean and Aegean coasts. The guy was a meticulous professional. Through these very detailed marginal notes written directly onto the gazelle skin itself, Piri Reis tells us exactly how he made his cartographic choices. He explicitly states he compiled this map from a synthesis of approximately 20 source charts. This included 4 contemporary Portuguese maps, 8 ancient Ptolemaic maps dating all the way back to antiquity, and, most intriguingly, maps from recent Western voyages. Which brings us to a truly fascinating annotation. Piri Reis explicitly claims he used a map drawn by Colombo in the Western region, meaning a now-lost map belonging to Christopher Columbus. This Columbus map has never actually been found by modern historians, but Piri Reis is telling us point blank that it existed and that Columbus had it before he even sailed. Just let the irony of that sink in for a second. An Ottoman admiral possessed Columbus's greatest geographical secrets, while Western history simply lost them. It raises some really profound questions about what Columbus actually knew, what secret source charts he might have had his hands on, and just how far south those charts actually extended. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the map is a composite. It's like a giant puzzle, and we can clearly see this when we compare its different regions. On the north and east side, the coastlines of Europe and Africa are highly accurate for the early 16th century. Even the American coastlines show the exact level of rudimentary post-Columbian accuracy you'd realistically expect for 1513. You know, the Caribbean islands and the Amazon River are there, even if they're a bit distorted. But then, we have the baffling, completely unprecedented specificity of that anomalous southern landmass. It just doesn't fit the technological limitations of 1513. Section 2. Hopgood's Antarctic Sub-Ice Hypothesis. This highly precise anomaly just sat there quietly until 1956, when a copy of the map was referred to the U.S. Navy Hydrographic Office. Then, in 1960, Captain Lorenzo Burrows of the U.S. Air Force Strategic Air Command formally assessed the map and made a staggering, professional conclusion. He stated that it showed Antarctica's sub-ice coastline. Now, a sub-ice coastline is the solid land surface beneath a glacial ice cap. In Antarctica's case, this actual rocky coast has been completely buried under massive, crushing sheets of ice for at least 6,000 years. This astonishing assessment from a literal Air Force cartography expert formed the bedrock of Professor Charles Hapgood's 1966 thesis, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood argued that this kind of precise data could only have come from source charts created by a highly advanced, pre-Ice Age maritime civilization capable of mapping the globe long before it froze over.
And Hapgood didn't just eyeball this and guess. He used a really complex grid-fitting method to mathematically align the Piri Reis map with modern seismic and radar surveys of the Antarctic sub-ice coastline. He matched the map's ancient bays and rivers specifically to a region we now know as Queen Maud Land. But doing that required incredibly accurate latitude and longitude, navigational math that wouldn't even be invented until the marine chronometer came along in the 18th century. This claim was so serious and so incredibly intriguing that it actually drew the attention of Albert Einstein. Einstein was so fascinated, he literally wrote the foreword to Hapgood's earlier book.
Section 3. Phineas and the Companion Maps. As it turns out, the Piri Reis map was not an isolated incident. There's actually a whole family of Renaissance companion maps that seem to encode the exact same geographic anomalies. This strongly suggests they were all drawing from the exact same ancient, lost source materials. If we map out the persistence of this anomaly chronologically, we start with Piri Reis in 1513. Then, in 1531, French cartographer Orontius Phineas draws a world map showing a full, circular southern continent centered right on the South Pole. And it came complete with the Ross Sea embayment and rivers draining an ice-free interior. Then the mystery jumps forward to 1737 with Philippe Bouet. The 1737 Bouache map is just completely astonishing because it depicted Antarctica divided into two distinct landmasses by a waterway. Keep in mind this is 1737. That is 83 years before Antarctica was even sighted by anyone. Yet, modern seismic science later discovered that Antarctica is indeed divided right there by the sub-ice West Antarctic Rift system. If you were to magically remove all the ice today, a massive trans-Antarctic channel appears exactly where Bouache drew it centuries ago. This modern discovery seriously validates the bizarrely specific nature of that 1773 drawing. It makes it nearly impossible to just dismiss it as pure random imagination. Section 4. The Skeptical South America Thesis.
Okay, so as incredible as the ancient Sea Kings hypothesis is, we absolutely must rigorously look at the scholarly counter-investigation. Because the skeptical response is serious, deeply researched, and it definitely deserves our full engagement. In the year 2000, cartographic historian Gregory McIntosh published the most exhaustive, detailed, scholarly examination of the map to date, and he offered a completely different explanation. The mainstream historical view is that the Piri Reis southern landmass is simply a distorted South America. McIntosh argues that Piri Reis essentially took the southern tip of South America, specifically Patagonia, and stretched it horizontally across the bottom of the map. Why would he do that? Well, to fit the prevailing cartographic convention of Terra Australis. That was a theoretical southern continent that early mapmakers just assumed had to exist to counterbalance the physical weight of the northern continents. So we're left with a direct clash of ideas here. On one side, we have Hapgood's Antarctic sub-ice theory. On the other, McIntosh's distorted South America argument. McIntosh points out a really massive hurdle for Hapgood: the projection problem. Remember, the Piri Reis map doesn't use a uniform mathematical scale. It's a stitched-together composite map. Because the scale actively warps and shifts depending on which specific source chart Piri Reis was copying at any given spot, McIntosh argues that Hapgood's geometric grid fitting was highly subjective. The argument is basically that, with enough degrees of freedom and shifting scales, you can bend a stretched-out Patagonia to look like Queen Maud Land if you just squint hard enough. Section 5. The Unsolved Asymmetry Problem.
So who's right? Well, both sides actually struggle with a really deep puzzle that we call the unsolved asymmetry problem. Here is the fatal flaw in the ancient knowledge thesis. If Piri Reis had access to impossibly advanced, mathematically perfect source charts from some lost civilization, why didn't those charts improve the known inaccuracies of the rest of the map? I mean, the American coastlines on the Piri Reis map feature exactly the kind of clumsy, distorted errors you'd expect from early 1513 explorers. The Caribbean is noticeably misplaced. If those ancient source charts were so incredibly advanced, why only the South? Why wouldn't the whole map reflect that same advanced accuracy? But we have to counterbalance that, because the skeptical thesis has a rather massive fatal flaw of its own. It's the probability paradox.
If that southern landmass is just South America stretched horizontally to look nice and fit a theory, what are the mathematical odds that a randomly distorted, stretched-out Patagonia accidentally aligns with a specific, completely hidden sub-ice topography of Queen Maud Land so closely that it impresses a literal U.S. Air Force cartographer? The statistical likelihood of that exact, highly specific coincidence has never been definitively calculated, but man, it feels like a massive stretch of its own. And so, the Piri Reis map remains this brilliant enigma, suspended perfectly in a space of genuine uncertainty. Piri Reis died in 1553, executed at age 83, taking his exact methods and secrets to the grave. His map outlasted him by 5 centuries, and it essentially forces us to ask, what was lost? What exactly was drawn on that missing Columbus map? It really reminds us that the history of human knowledge isn't always just a straight, upward line of progress. Sometimes knowledge is fragmented, it's buried, and it's forgotten. Until we have better analytical tools, the mysteries compiled on that single, fragile piece of gazelle skin will continue sleeping quietly in the Topkapi archives, leaving all of us to wonder just how much of our own past remains undiscovered.